And welcome back to Wednesdays with Will. My name is AJ Magoon and I am your guest host with the most this week. Now let's get started. So we've talked a lot about Shakespeare in this series. In fact, it's a series entirely about Shakespeare, but Shakespeare wasn't the only person writing plays around the time that he was alive. In fact, the Elizabethan theater scene was active. It was bustling. We call it the Elizabethan theater scene because for most of Shakespeare's life, Queen Elizabeth I was the Queen of England. Now, later, of course, King James took over, but we'll get to that later. Now, during Shakespeare's lifetime, he was writing plays alongside a bunch of people who were very well known at the time, although none of them are as well known as he is nowadays. People like Ben Jonson, Thomas Kyd, and the original bad boy of English theater, Christopher Marlowe. And all of these authors wrote different plays about different things, but there were certain things about their plays that were similar no matter whose play you were at. The different features of plays that Shakespeare and his contemporaries all included in their plays were known as the conventions of Elizabethan theater. Now, theatrical conventions are a set of similarities, features in common, or other things that are shared between different forms of theatrical literature from the same time period. We've already talked in this series about how Shakespeare's plays include a lot of different, very interesting characters because Shakespeare's actors, and actors in London in general, were the only people allowed to dress in interesting, fancy clothes outside their social status because of the English sumptuary laws. In addition, most, if not all, English Elizabethan playwrights included things like disguises and masks in a lot of their plays. You'll see this in plays like Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, where Viola dresses up as Cesario, or As You Like It, where Rosalind pretends to be Ganymede for most of the play. There's also a lot of eavesdropping that happens in Shakespeare's plays and in English Elizabethan plays throughout the period, and a lot of people wearing masks. Shakespeare included masks in several of his plays like Romeo and Juliet and Much Ado About Nothing, where people show up at dances, disguise their faces, and get to talk to other people like they wouldn't normally talk to each other. The disguises that Rosalind and Viola wear in their respective plays have yet another level to them, because in English Elizabethan theater, Shakespeare's plays and other people's plays, women didn't actually play women. They were usually young boys who were instead playing the women. So Rosalind would have actually been a young boy playing a woman playing a man. Another big feature of Elizabethan theater, whether Shakespeare's plays or other plays, was the use of stock characters. These were characters like the sassy maid, the young lovers, the pompous intellectual, or the fool, which we've talked about before, that audiences would recognize from other plays. They may not have been the same exact character, but they shared similar traits and similar features, so when they showed up in the plays, the audience would automatically understand them and kind of know how they were going to act. Elizabethan theater didn't just feature these conventions in the plays themselves, but often in the way that the plays were performed. Plays that Shakespeare or other playwrights of the time wrote would have often been performed with what was known as presentational acting. This was acting that was a little bit more stiff or wooden than we would otherwise think of acting nowadays, and was meant more to speak the words to the audience than really to embody a realistic character. This ties in really well with things like soliloquies and asides that we talked about earlier, where Shakespearean characters would speak right to the audience. There wasn't really an illusion that these characters were real people. Audiences knew that they were actors who were speaking to them and trying to get something important across. Finally, a lot of Elizabethan plays, whether they were written by Shakespeare or someone else, tended to focus on the upper class. Kings and queens, royals, nobles, and wealthy people were the subjects of Shakespeare's plays. Think of all of the plays that he wrote about English royalty in his histories. While these plays featured folks from the lower class, the plays themselves and the plots that were in them focused, both in their settings and plot, on the people of the upper class, and it was thought that watching the triumphs and sorrows of upper class people was the best way to truly experience their emotions and therefore the human experience. Now, thinking about theatrical conventions can get a little confusing or abstract. We understand that these are elements that Shakespeare used in his plays, but what does it mean exactly? I like to think of it kind of like superheroes. Who's your favorite superhero? What's your favorite superhero movie? Mine is Captain America. And in Captain America, and most of the other superhero movies I can think of, you have an evil villain. You have a cool costume. You have a hero saving civilians from danger. Those are conventions of the superhero movie. So, my project for you this week is to think up more conventions of a superhero movie. What do they all share in common? You could even think about comics or stories. What do all superheroes have in common in the stories that we tell about them? And then, from there, use that list of conventions to make your own superhero. Who's their supervillain? What's their costume look like? How do they go about saving civilians? What other things make them like other superheroes? And then, of course, when you're done, we want you to send those superheroes to us so that we can check out the cool conventions that you used to make your hero. Caroline will be back next week for another Wednesdays with Will, but until then, stay safe, be kind, and have a great week. Bye!